This all began with Yuichi. He's in his second year at school and lives a pretty normal routine. Every morning he's up before sunrise to toss newspapers, using that paycheck to cover his day-to-day costs. Today he hustles even harder because there's a class trip happening next month, and he's determined to go since he and his close group already planned it together. At school we meet his tight circle. There's Shibei, the blonde rich kid who would happily loan Yuichi cash if it ever came to that. Shiho can't stand how cocky Shibei acts and tells him to cool it. Then Tenji and Yutori walk in and nudge Shiho to let it slide and forgive their clueless friend. Tenji has a genius brain and a spotless image. Yutori is quiet and has a history of being bullied. The five of them feel solid as a team, and Yuichi wishes nothing would ever change. That wish doesn't last. Their teacher announces the money for the trip to 00 yen for the whole class has vanished. Shiho begs whoever took it to admit it, so the class doesn't fall apart. No one steps forward. Things look worse the next day when both Shiho and Shibi don't show up. Since they were the ones holding the cash, people start whispering that they probably did it. That evening, Yuichi gets a note from Sho asking him to meet at the school. He hurries over and finds all four of his friends there too. Each one was told that Yuichi called them. It's a setup. Before he can make sense of it, a jolt hits him from behind. As he blacks out, he catches a blur of his friends being dragged away. While he's out, two voices from his life collide in his head. His teacher always said money is what matters most. His mom always said friends matter more. When he wakes up, he and the others are shut inside a white room. A doll waddles in. Yutori recognizes it immediately. Manabu, a character from an old cartoon. Manabu tells them they're now in a game. Win a round, and they get 200 yen. Clear the whole thing, and the total becomes 200 yen. That pot, Manabu says, exists to cover a debt. Yuichi snaps back that it's nonsense, but the doll adds a brutal detail. One of Yuichi's friends is sitting on exactly 200 yen of debt. Tenji tries to push back. He calls this kidnapping, points out there's no proof, and Manabu answers by dropping another bomb. Someone in their group paid a 200 yen entry fee to sign them up. That means the class trip thief and the person who dragged them into this mess are the same person. They're given a choice. Refuse to play. The 200 yen deposit disappears, and the single person who owes money is stuck paying the full 200 yen alone. Agree to play. The debt is split evenly among all five. If they win, the debt vanishes. If they lose, all of them carry the entire load. Manabu lets them think it over. They decide not to hunt the traitor right now and agree to participate because, as friends, helping each other feels like the only move. Yuichi wrestles with the old question, cash or friendship, which matters more. He decides his friends come first, and they step into the game together. The first challenge starts. On the table sits a huge coin and 5 nameplates, each showing that person's amount owed. The total 200 yen is already split evenly, so every plate shows 400 yen. Rules roll out. Nobody is allowed to show their own debt slip to anyone. If someone does, their debt doubles. All 5 must keep a hand on the coin and slide it together to answer each prompt. If every person agrees, the coin slides to the chosen answer. If even one person disagrees, the coin flips to the opposite choice. This setup measures how unified they are and gives the edge to the minority voice. They also can't talk except while a question is being read. Speak at the wrong time, and your debt doubles. A final warning. When the game ends, whoever ranks last will be stuck with the entire debt. The hint to win is simple: stick together and don't crack. Sheeb reads the first prompt. Is Mount Fuji the tallest mountain in Japan? Everyone knows the right pick is yes, yet the coin lands on the other option. They blow a chance to lower what they owe. Shiho tries to say something, but the others stop her. No one wants a penalty for talking at the wrong moment. The second prompt is just as simple, and again the coin ends up on the wrong side. That makes it obvious someone is sabotaging them. Yuichi's mind goes to Sheeb. A few days earlier, Shiho punched Shibei when he tried to flirt, so maybe he wants payback. Shibi had asked the group for help making things right with Shiho, and everyone brushed him off. Even so, Shiho had already cooled down because Yuichi spoke up for Shibei. Back in the round, the third prompt appears, easy again, and yet the result gets wrecked a third time. Now, it's Yuichi's turn to read number 4. He looks down and sees there isn't a question at all. The players have to create one themselves. Under that instruction is a note. If the coin ends on yes, the group wins the round. If it ends on no, the reader's personal debt is cut in half. It finally clicks for Yuichi. The first 3 were basic on purpose, but someone kept nudging the coin to no to slice their own debt and push the weight onto whoever currently owed the most. For a second he thinks about being selfish and picking no to help himself. Then he looks at the turn order. Yutori goes last. She's fragile and not built to carry a mountain of debt by herself. He aims for the group result to protect her. Even so, someone still selects no. That tells him someone in the room is actively trying to dump everything onto Yutori. It's extra scary because the final prompt doesn't come with any special note to reduce what you owe, unlike the first four. When it's Yutori's turn, her prompt is plain and honest. Will we all stay friends? The people watching note that this should have been the very first prompt at the beginning. The answer would have been yes without hesitation. But after all this distrust, the majority is now likely to pick no. Yuichi doesn't want Yutori crushed by that. He breaks the silence rule and speaks up, fully aware that this will double his own debt. He does it anyway so she won't get isolated and stuck with everything. He calls out the group, saying they're steering the debt onto Yutori on purpose, and then claims a different true rule that the person with the smallest debt at the end actually loses. The others suspect he's bluffing, but none of them is willing to risk talking and becoming the next target. Because of his move, everyone chooses yes, and they clear the round. Even after passing, they notice something odd. Each person's total only drops by 400 yen. Yuichi also figures his own number didn't really change, since he got a 50% cut from the note but then wiped it out by doubling his debt when he spoke out of turn. Manabu pushes them toward game 2. Yuichi hangs back a moment to check the prompt sheets and the little notes from the first round, but they're gone, like they never existed. Shiho circled back to meet Yuichi and talked straight about a snake hiding among them. Yuichi's gut leaned towards Shiho, not because she was sloppy, but because she was the exact opposite. She's precise, steady, and always follows a plan. The kind of person who would normally chase the real thief of the class funds instead of playing along with a shady game. Seeing her here didn't line up with the way she usually handles problems, so it set off alarms for him. Shiho, on the other hand, had her eyes on Yuichi. She pointed to his money troubles as a possible reason he'd sign up for something this dirty. She said she hadn't called him out earlier, not out of pity but because she genuinely cares about him. She also owned up to a penalty. After the group blew the first prompt, she accidentally made a sound and got hit with a rule violation that doubled what she owed. She believed Yuichi deliberately broke a rule later to protect her, because at that exact moment, she was carrying the biggest debt. Their whole talk didn't stay private. Tenji overheard it. Up above, the observers watching the game sized Yuichi up as sharp with cash and quick on tactics, but they doubted brainpower alone could carry him. Someone inside the group was actively smashing their bond on purpose. They advanced to game 2. This time, there was a crowd in the gallery overhead, and the challenge was designed to rot friendships from the inside out. The instructions were messy at first, so Manabu laid it out in simple steps. One at a time, a player goes into a separate room, writes something nasty about one friend on a slip, and drops it into a box. Manabu reads the submitted line out loud. The audience then votes on who should move the farthest along a board. The first person to hit the finish line would take on the entire debt load and continue alone, while the remaining 4 would be knocked out right there. There was one escape hatch. If everyone turned in blank slips, each person would advance exactly 1 space. If they kept that up, they could reach the end shoulder to shoulder and proceed to round 3 together. Manabu warned that a betrayer almost certainly wouldn't play nice, so betting everything on blank entries was dangerous. The 2 supervisors laughed to themselves, convinced that people are selfish by default, and eager to see how quickly the group would crack. For the first 2 turns, every player submitted a blank. The whole team slid forward 2 spaces total. 1 space per clean round, but each square on the path came with fine print conditions that layered extra debt onto their tabs as they moved. Then Manabu dropped a twist. All of those added penalties would be dumped onto the person who reached the finish line first. Starting with the 3rd turn, the cracks widened. Someone slipped in a real insult aimed at Shiho, exposing that she liked Yuichi even though she had previously dated Tenji. The watchers noted, almost cheerfully, that love drama is the fastest way to blow up a friend group. Because of the audience vote on that barb, Shiho had to jump 5 spaces, while everyone else crept forward only 1. The blowback was immediate. Shibe lashed out at Yuichi, saying Yuichi had played him knowing Shiho's feelings and keeping quiet. Tenji snapped at Shibe for being jealous, reminding him he was her ex. Shiho cut in and explained that her relationship with Tenji wasn't a romance. Their fathers are old friends and practically arranged it. She never felt that way about him. Tenji, however, really did care for her, which made him bristle even harder when Shibe spoke crudely about her. The fight pivoted to accusations over the insult slip. Shibe and Tenji turned their suspicion on each other. Tenji tried to redirect the room with logic, pushing the blame toward Shibe for spreading the love triangle rumor in the first place. He also argued that he wouldn't write that line himself because it would instantly make him the obvious suspect. Before the tension tipped into swinging fists, Yuichi stepped between them and told them to center Shiho's feelings if they actually cared about her. Off to the side, Yutori felt the sting of being overlooked and quietly stewed that all three boys were wrapped up in Shiho while she faded into the background. Next round, 3 insults landed at once. The worst of them outed that Shiho had gotten plastic surgery. The vote shoved her forward again several spaces while Yuichi moved only 1 and Shibe moved 2. The jabs kept getting nastier, and the gap between friends widened with each reveal. Then came a hit that cut even deeper. Yutori's past as a sugar baby was dragged into the open. The shame and panic overwhelmed her. She immediately pointed at Shiho because Shiho was the only person who knew and accused her of the betrayal. Shibe, being clumsy with words at the worst possible time, made tone-deaf comments that made everything worse, and Tenji decked him in anger. After that punch, Tenji turned to Yuichi and asked him to be the one to console Yutori, saying only Yuichi had the calm she'd accept. A few more rounds passed, and the board position told a clear story. Tenji lagged at the very back. Manabu repeated the rules, but it no longer felt like dead totals were the real pressure point. The constant exposure of private pain had become the real weapon. Yutori opened up completely. She had been targeted by severe bullying. Both her teachers and her classmates looked away when she begged for help. To get the harassment to stop, she paid her abusers. The money drain pushed her into becoming a sugar baby for a wealthy, ugly man. At first, it meant fancy meals and being seen in public. Later, he demanded cosplay and photos. When he tried to cross a physical line, she ran for it. She believed she hadn't crossed that line, but people online refused to believe her. She turned to Yuichi and begged him to believe her story, because in her mind, he was the only person she still had. If he stepped away now, she would have no one. The supervisors watching from above smirked at a familiar pattern. In their eyes, most people think that staying pure gives them permission to look down on anyone they label dirty. In a crowd like this, they expected nearly everyone to pin blame on Yutori. Yuichi refused to play that game. He accepted her history without flinching and made it clear he doesn't abandon his friends. He leaned in, whispered something only she could hear, and asked her to put her trust in him. That single act made the watchers trade glances. If he could extend grace that easily, maybe his own past carried scars heavier than Yutori's. Even with Yuichi's support, Yutori's suspicion of Shiho didn't fade. She wanted distance. The truth, though, was different. Shiho knew about Yutori's situation because she had helped her before, and Yutori had confided in her after being saved. Shiho hadn't pried or pushed for details, and she had never once broken a promise to her friends. From the balcony, the observers noted that the hidden saboteur had done exactly what they wanted. The point wasn't profit. The point was to split the 5 of them apart. And whoever it was, that person was likely smiling now, because they were also the one who stole the 200 yen from the class trip fund. A flashback stitched the pieces together. The thief was one of the 5. During the steal, they collided with Yutori. Her pen scraped under the culprit's eye and left a small cut. That same person was the only one who knew about Shiho's cosmetic surgery, which she had done to cover a scar on her cheek. That same person outed Yutori's secret too, because they had slipped Shiho a cute keychain that actually hid a listening device. The betrayer was Tenji, the one with a tiny scar under his eye. He wasn't chasing money. He engineered the chaos to isolate Shiho by wrecking every relationship around her so he could keep her to himself. Shiho went back to Yuichi because she wanted Tenji to hear from her that she wasn't the one who leaked his private info. Tenji accepted it without a fight, and the reason was simple. He was the real mastermind. Out of the 5 secrets that had been thrown into the ring so far, the 3 nastiest ones were written by Tenji himself. He had already cracked Yutori's trust in Shiho. The next step was flipping the suspicion so Shiho would start looking at Yutori. Tenji figured Shiho could easily believe that Yutori exposed her own past just to smear Shiho, make her look terrible in front of everyone, and then pull Yuichi to her side. Tenji also judged that Yutori would never beat Shiho head-to-head for Yuichi's attention. In his mind, Yutori was kind-hearted and easily moved by pity, which made her easy to steer. Manabu pushed them to keep playing, so Yutori told Tenji to take the next turn first. Tenji noticed he was sitting in last place now. If the insults kept skipping him, people would start pointing fingers at him. To protect his image, he decided to write a hit piece about himself. By attacking himself, he could pretend to be honest and keep the group's trust. When Tenji came back out, the situation had already blown up. Yutori had just slapped Shiho. The reason? Shiho had accused Yutori of staging an insult against herself to look like a victim and draw Yuichi in, and Yutori snapped. Tenji saw the opening immediately. The friendship between the girls was cracked, and that made every other bond wobble. Shiho said out loud that girls aren't afraid to fight dirty for what they want. Yutori fired back by dragging up Shiho's plastic surgery. Shiho then calmly explained why she'd had the procedure. Hearing that, Shibi stepped back towards Shiho's side to support her. From that point on, the two girls didn't trust each other at all, and because Yuichi stayed close to comfort Yutori, Shiho's trust in Yuichi also fell apart. Tenji watched the dominoes fall exactly how he wanted, Shiho versus Yutori, and both of them doubting Yuichi. He walked over to Shiho while she was hurt and angry. Shiho pushed Yuichi away and chose to stand with Tenji. Manabu kept the round moving, and the 4 active players went back in. Only 2 slips contained insults this time. The first comment didn't matter much. The second was Tenji's new lie. He wrote that he was 1 year older than the others, that something had happened, and he had to repeat a grade, which is why he was in their class now. Only Shiho knew that fact, which made the room look at her. Tenji planted that story on purpose to isolate Shiho, so she'd have no one left but him. Because of the vote, Shiho had to advance extra spaces on the board. That particular square also gave her a special option. She could pick someone and reveal a secret about them. Then the audience would vote on whether to forgive that person. If the crowd refused to forgive, she would be forced to move 10 more steps as a penalty. That clause scared Tenji. If Shiho chose him, the organizers would expose the truth that he was the one who signed them up for this mess. Since Tenji now stood closest to Shiho, it would be natural for her to test him. Right then, Shibi stepped forward and offered himself. He wanted to carry the blame to win Shiho's trust back. The reveal that followed wasn't about Shibe's own actions, but about his family. The game announced that Shibe's father is a dirty politician womanizing, cheating, embezzling, and burying problems with money. The people monitoring the game predicted this would split the group. Most parents wouldn't want their kid hanging out with the child of a criminal, so they expected the audience to turn on Shibi. Tenji used that win to push harder. He argued that Shibi couldn't be considered clean, because if the father had covered up so many things, there was a good chance Shibi had also done wrong in the past and been protected. That argument left Shibe completely alone. The audience voted almost unanimously against him, about 99%. He was forced to advance 9 spaces in one go, ending up right behind Shiho on the track. The next turn began, and Tenji wanted to wrap this up quickly. After the votes came in, only a single new accusation appeared. Shibi killed someone. Tenji froze. He hadn't written anything that round. He had already stirred the pot enough and was planning to stop to avoid drawing attention. Watching the reactions, he realized that line came from Yuichi. Up above, the supervisors perked up now the show was getting interesting. If you looked closely at the entire mess, Yuichi had been quietly steering the flow the whole time. Shibi insisted he'd never taken a life and called it a lie. Tenji agreed in his head. Someone like Shibi didn't even have the guts for that. Shibi begged Manabu to punish the liar, but the rule only activates if he can prove he's innocent. Shibi asked to check his criminal record, but even if one existed, his father would have wiped it clean. Manabu, let the supervisors decide. In his panic, Shibi blurted out something terrible for his case. If he had done it, his father would have cleaned it up. That own goal made the audience push him 5 more spaces forward. Yuichi said he still believed in Shibe and started laying out his own analysis. He claimed that the betrayer had written every major smear from the start. He tried to point at a single person but said he couldn't name them yet, which made Tenji think he was just stalling. Then Yuichi explained why the board itself gave away the design. Since a crowd was watching, the track couldn't be loaded only with debt traps that pile on money owed forever. If that were true, the organizers would always win. Players would reach the end worse off than when they began, and viewers would get bored. Also, the route worked like a Monopoly-style board, which means there had to be squares that cleared debt, and they had already seen one earlier that reduced what they owed. So, if all 5 finished together, the debt increases, and the debt clears would mostly cancel out. The problem was they had figured this out late. Even so, Yuichi proposed a fix. Because Shibe was farthest ahead, everyone else should write insults about themselves only, which would push the rest forward and allow them to catch up without hurting each other anymore. If anyone broke that rule and wrote an insult about Shibe instead, they would expose themselves because they wouldn't be holding a self-insult card for the turn. That way Shibe could stay put while the group tightened up behind him. Tenji shot it down. If Yuichi really knew the traitor, he should name them now. Then they could force the betrayer to arrive at round 3 alone, and the rest could move on together. Tenji pressed and pressed, saying Yuichi was too soft to make the hard call. The votes were revealed, 10 total slanders. There was no cap on how many insults could be submitted, so the plan fell apart instantly. Tenji demanded that Yuichi expose the traitor. Cornered, Yuichi admitted he invented the story about having proof. Trust in him collapsed exactly how Tenji expected. With that, Tenji only had to keep moving to finish his personal revenge on Shiho, the person he felt had stolen what mattered most to him. Play continued until Shiho stepped onto the last square before the end. From there, no matter what choice she made on her next action, she would move one more space and enter the final game. But the round wasn't over, because the people running things had noticed something new. Yuichi was a dangerous player. He had been shaping the game from the shadows while everyone looked elsewhere. Yuichi switched tactics. He said they should cooperate right now to flush out the betrayer. The rules were clear lie and you get punished. So if all 5 of them wrote, "I was the one who signed us up," each person would be lying, every one of them would receive a penalty, and they could shoulder it together. Then the true culprit would get separated and removed before the next stage. Yuichi specifically asked Tenji to go first because, at this point, Shiho trusted Tenji more than anyone. Tenji saw the trap closing. He chose to follow Yuichi's plan on paper and decided he would cry and make excuses afterward to save himself. The slips came back. Only one person had written anything, Tenji. Everyone else left their paper blank. Tenji tried to launch into the waterworks. Yuichi cut him off and told him to admit everything first and explain later. The look on Yuichi's face had changed, as cold as he can be. Yuichi laid out, step by step, everything he'd been engineering since the second stage. The moment Tenji started tossing insults, Yuichi quietly paired up with Shiho, passing notes on scrap paper in the room so no one would notice. During the third turn, he purposely left his own slip empty, but the ceiling camera still caught him with a pen and slipping 2 ballots into the box. Right after, he rested a hand on Shiho's shoulder to signal that he'd handed her something. He wanted her to write a secret that only the 2 of them knew, so she'd recognize the signal, trust him, and keep the link secret. He kept everyone else at arm's length to smoke out the mole. When it was Yutori's turn later, he slid her a hidden message. "Shiho's with us, pretend to fight me so the real snake shows itself." That's why, on the next pass, Shiho exposed the one detail only Yutori had heard. With that move and Shid volunteering his own reveal, 2 people were effectively neutralized, leaving Tenji as the remaining problem. To stop Tenji from melting down and wrecking the board, Yuichi used the loophole plan to stall him until the track was nearly finished, then planned to point the finger. He also blocked mass dog piles by collecting everyone's name tags. Since each person wanted to prove they weren't the saboteur, they'd rush to show their badge on command. With the tags held as leverage, nobody could go off script. They had to run Yuichi's play. Watching from above, the supervisors muttered that Yuichi was frighteningly good at steering people nudging minds the way belief systems do. Tenji asked why Yuichi cut him out but didn't immediately frame him. Yuichi answered that Tenji's behavior was off. The guy who usually calmed fights had suddenly gone after Shade, accusing him of spreading smears, yet nobody had confided anything serious to Shibi in ages because he's known for blabbing. Tenji accepted the loss there. Yuichi had picked a soft target like Shibe to carry the suspicion while the real trap closed elsewhere. With no clean way to fix Shiho's view of him, Tenji had nothing left to say. Yuichi then owned up to Manabu. He'd lied, and he'd take the penalty himself to cover for Shiho so someone could enter round 3. The staff verified it and let him proceed alone. Yuichi also admitted the Shibe killed someone line was false because the only killer in the room was Yuichi. He said he had ended 3 lives. The supervisor labeled him a monster. Yuichi turned to leave for the next phase, vowing to tear down Manabu and the whole operation. His friends refused to believe he could be a murderer, but Manabu confirmed it as fact. Arguments exploded around his name. In that noise, Yuichi felt his mother's lesson, friends matter more than money, stopped making sense. Right then, friends felt heavy, like chains. He chose to go forward alone to keep them out of what came next. As he stepped toward the drop, Tenji moved beside him. He wanted to make it right and asked to go too. He admitted he had lied about liking Shiho. The real reason he entered was to meet Yuichi head-on and win his first kiss, as proof to himself. The organizers allowed both to advance and added a warning. Tenji clearly had other reasons this was his second run at this game. Back when Yuichi was younger, his mom told him the most valuable thing in life was friendship, not money. He agreed back then. But, leaving the hospital one day, his teacher told him the opposite, that cash outranks everything, and that thought stuck. He snapped awake after those memories and found himself and Tenji in a cave. Yuichi asked where they were. Tenji had no idea. Manabu's voice rolled across the rock. "Wait here 3 days while the next trial is prepared. You'll have water only." During that pause, Tenji said he had to explain himself. If he stayed with Yuichi, He'd finally get the time to tell the whole story why he betrayed him and all the pieces around it. He also revealed this was his second time playing the friendship game. Before he went deeper, he motioned for Yuichi to cover both of their name tags in case the cavern had bugs. Tenji's story started with Shiho. He said she took the thing he valued most. In middle school, he had two best friends. The trio made plans like a tiny startup, and Tenji told them he'd saved a big stack of money and wanted to launch a business with them before they turned 18. His friends were shocked he'd split it, but Tenji thought if the three of them stuck tight, nobody could stop them. A year later, Shiho transferred into their school, and Tenji's project was still on track. One day the boys asked if he and Shiho were together. He explained it was just a parents-arranged pairing and they were only friends. After that, the three tightened their bookkeeping, keeping the fund at the same level it was when they entered high school. Once high school started, they split the cash into 3 pools and agreed to invest separately. Whoever had the biggest return before turning 20 would become company president. That should have been fine until the other two added a clause. The new president also earned the right to confess to Shiho. Tenji felt that was a fuse waiting to burn their trio down, but he went along, hoping to stall the damage. Not long after, all 3 were dragged into the friendship game because one of them owed 10 million yen. They lost. Tenji came home carrying a 20 million yen debt and a gag order no talking about what happened. He confronted one friend, who admitted he'd blown money on presents for Shiho, but he clammed up, terrified the game would erase him. Soon both friends moved away, and Shiho's presence in Tenji's life pressed harder. Tenji turned to the person he trusted most, his father. His dad listened, understood, and said he'd take care of it. That same day, Tenji got the worst call. His father was dead. The police stamped it with a conclusion Tenji knew didn't fit something they claimed he'd done to himself, even though Tenji was sure his father would never. Right before leaving the house, his dad had mentioned he was going to visit Shiho's family. From then on, Tenji felt every bad turn circled back to her. He investigated and found nothing. Then a letter came. Stop digging into Shiho's past or you'll vanish too. That's what pushed Tenji to haul everyone into the friendship game now to expose what he believed Shiho was hiding. Yuichi's moves wrecked that plan, but Tenji still thought Shiho might be the traitor. He was certain she was sitting on something huge. They turned to numbers. The running total was 10.8 million yen, yet by the figures Yuichi had collected, it should have been 18.8 million. That meant someone falsified the amount. Yuichi didn't know where Tenji got his debt data, so Tenji called up to Manabu, asked again, and got confirmation. They reran the math from earlier rounds. Tenji showed Yuichi his real owed amount. When they recomputed the group's totals after Game 2, they were still short by 4 million compared with what Manabu had said before. Shiho's share looked strangely high, which made it seem like she had lied about how much she owed. If that was true, Yuichi said, she must be a practiced liar, but he kept a sliver of doubt, since Tenji could be the one bending the truth. After the last chaos, Yuichi accepted that, right now, they were basically strangers sharing a room. Even Tenji didn't know Yuichi had once taken a life, so I stick with him. Tenji answered that he wanted justice for his father and to smash the game itself, and Yuichi was the only shot at pulling that off. To prove he meant it, Tenji held out his badge and debt figure. The rule bit him instantly. His balance doubled for the reveal. He bowed, said he'd accept being used like a tool, and asked to follow Yuichi's lead. 2.5 days later, he asked Tenji how close he felt to Shibi or Yutori. Tenji called them outsiders. Yuichi pushed back, they're still your friends. If Tenji truly felt guilt, he had to apologize to both for dragging them into this, even if they never forgive him. Tenji agreed. On that promise, Yuichi promised back. He'd stand with Tenji through the 3rd trial. Half a day after the cave, the two of them were led out into a thick forest, where Manabu was already waiting. He told them the next trial was straight up hide and seek, but not a simple version. They'd be up against another squad of 5. Tenji didn't get why there had to be a rival team at all. Manabu said real friendship only shows up when there's pressure from the outside. If Tenji had a buddy who might stab him in the back while the other side moved like a perfectly synced group of 5, jealousy would creep in and trust would crack. This round was designed to fight that mindset. The only way through was to trust your own side no matter what. Manabu laid out the rules clearly. One person hides, everyone else on that team searches. The side with fewer people is naturally weaker, and after everything that happened with Yuichi's group, they were walking in already split and shaky. The 5-person side had the advantage because they were in sync. There was also a nasty twist. Team switching was allowed. Any player could flip to the enemy side and dump their remaining debt onto the team that loses. If you switched, you could walk away clean, no more debt at all. For Yuichi's group specifically, switching would be an instant defeat. Then Manabu gave Yuichi a choice. Someone from another team had been left alone. Yuichi could pick that person up and add them to his side. Yuichi only asked one thing: was it a girl? Manabu said yes. Yuichi agreed to take her. Tenji didn't like the idea of a stranger walking in right now, but Yuichi pointed out they couldn't possibly win with only 2 people. They needed the extra body. The girl, Maria, joined them. Maria wasn't random. She worked for the supervision staff. They planted her with Yuichi because he'd openly said he wanted to tear the whole system down, and they wanted to see if he was hiding a plan. Tenji chose to be the one who hides. He wanted Yuichi outside, watching the field and keeping an eye on Maria so she couldn't flip to the other side. Both teams got 2 hours to prep their hideouts. While scouting, Tenji went over the rulebook. No using force to make someone reveal a hiding place. The hider must stay put until the round ends, no moving at all. Break those and it's an instant loss. Plus your debt doubles. On the allowed side, each team got phones so they could talk. There was also a supply camp set up at the center of the woods. Since the hider isn't allowed to leave his spot, the seekers have to run food to him on a regular basis. Another rule hit harder: the hider can give up. Being the hider means total isolation, no walking around, no change of scenery, just waiting until your team finds the enemy's hider. If the loneliness gets too heavy, there's a button, press it, and you surrender, which means your entire side loses immediately. Yuichi picked a hiding place for Tenji and, just to be safe, posted Maria far away from that spot. Tenji still worried about their chances. Yuichi was blunt: if both sides played clean, they'd probably lose. If they played dirty, he believed they would win. What mattered most was Tenji's stamina. The longer Tenji could sit in silence and hold out, the easier it would be for Yuichi to flip the board. Tenji said he could handle it. Yuichi promised he wouldn't fail him. Time expired, Yuichi headed out, and 2 full days went by without a single check-in. Tenji hadn't eaten since the round started. He was drying out, head spinning, thoughts racing. Panic crept in. He started to wonder if Yuichi had ditched him. If Yuichi had actually joined the other side, though, Tenji would have been caught already. That made him think of something worse: maybe Yuichi was dragging this out on purpose to pay him back for what he did in the second game. Tenji used his phone and dialed Yuichi. Someone from the other team answered. They told Tenji exactly what he feared. Yuichi had no plan to come back. For the last 2 days, they said, he'd been hanging around the supply camp, eating, relaxing, and not even trying to look for Tenji. Tenji still held onto a sliver of faith and hung up, but his confidence shook hard. He started to unravel, begging inside for Yuichi to show up and explain. The scene jumps back to 2 days earlier, the moment the round began, when the rival team was introduced. Their hider was also their captain. Next was a young guy named Onigawara. Then came Chisato, the one in their group who could charm anyone. After him was the youngest member. Last was Banri, a glasses-wearing strategist type. The 4 seekers built their plan around how the rules really worked. With a forest this big, you can have 10 people or 20 and still never find a single hiding spot. The real win condition was protecting food runs. If the seeker side can't feed their hider, he breaks. So they split duties. The captain ordered Onigawara and Chisato to watch the supply camp. Banri and the youngest teammate scouted and picked the captain's hiding place. To lock in unity, they did a team ritual together. Even the 2 supervisors running the show made bets on which side would come out on top. 3 days rolled by with not much to report, and the rival team supervisor said Tenji would hit the surrender button soon. Their read of the whole round was simple. This wasn't about locating a hider in a massive forest. It was about the supply camp: guard it, wait for the weaker team to bring food to their hider, then shadow them and win off their delivery route. All 5 of them had played on the same sports team before, so they had the lungs and legs to keep eyes on Yuichi and Maria non-stop. They could rotate shifts at the camp and still haul meals out to their own captain. In their minds, if they stayed on Yuichi long enough, Tenji would break first, press the button, and the game would be over. That night, the 2 supervisors spotted Tenji slipping into hunger-fueled delusions. In his head, Yuichi was finally showing up with a meal. In reality, Yuichi had spent almost 3 full days parked at the supply camp, eating and lounging like this was a picnic. Even so, the supervisors didn't buy the lazy act. Maria had been filing quiet reports, warning them that Yuichi was way more unhinged and intimidating than he looked. Out of nowhere, Yuichi announced he wanted to defect to the other side. The supervisors, knowing how he operates, understood he treats men and women exactly the same as pieces for whatever scheme he's running. Everyone assumed that if he crossed over, he'd quickly cook up a plan that wrecked the 5-person team from within. But there was a catch. If he truly switched, Tenji would lose on the spot and eat all the debt. The rival team still chose caution. They said they needed their captain's go-ahead before they let Yuichi in. Yuichi laughed at them for needing permission on every move. calling them a flock that only marches when the leader whistles. Onigawara's temper spiked and he nearly swung, but the others grabbed him. One punch meant disqualification, and they weren't about to hand over the round. Onigawara cooled down, and the youngest teammate ran off to fetch the captain. The blonde supervisor figured the answer was obvious: say yes to Yuichi and lock in an easy win. When the youngest returned, the decision was actually no. They wanted a slow, controlled game. If Yuichi truly intended to swap, then Maria needed to come with him. They weren't about to let him learn their captain's hideout and then slip that location back to Maria behind their backs. Onigawara taunted them both to jump sides together. What none of them knew was that 2 days earlier, Yuichi had already walked Maria through a plan. On day 3, he'd fake a defection. If it worked, he'd collect the enemy's hideout info and pass it to her. If it failed, he'd pivot to something else. More than anything, he wanted to see whether Maria would trust the strategy. He asked her a question that sent a thrill through her, proof that his limits were far past what she had imagined. In the end, he didn't switch. Not because they sniffed him out, but because he'd found a better path to victory. Those first 2 days at the camp weren't wasted. While he looked idle, he was poking and prodding, pulling threads, and learning how the five moved. The next morning, the youngest teammate and Banri headed out to feed their captain. Onigawara and Chisato stayed behind to guard the camp. After some small talk with Onigawara, Chisato peeled off to shadow Maria. Yuichi slid into the quiet and struck up a real conversation with Onigawara. He praised how tight their team ran. Onigawara confessed he felt like dead weight. He'd actually injured their leader before, and he'd been grinding ever since to make up for it. Yuichi casually asked who had dragged their team into debt to begin with. Chisato showed up just in time to trade places and shut that door. Onigawara went to check on Maria and realized she'd vanished. He panicked, assumed she'd gone to make a food run, and sprinted after her only to stumble on her bathing in a nearby stream. He turned bright red and backed off. When he returned, still flustered, Yuichi suddenly barked a signal, and Maria bolted. Yuichi dashed the other way. The split forced Onigawara and Chisato to divide and chase. After a messy loop through the trees, all four funneled onto the same cliffside path. Without warning, Yuichi shoved Maria off the edge. The supervisors jolted, the rival team froze, and even Maria herself hadn't seen that coming. While that chaos played out, Tenji was collapsing. No food, no water, mind fried. He stared at the surrender button, then pulled his hand away. He decided he was done betraying anyone. He would use whatever strength he had left to trust Yuichi completely. Right as his hopes started to drain away, Yuichi showed up and dragged him back from the brink. Tenji ate, drank, and finally asked why it had taken so long. Yuichi said he hadn't spelled out the real shape of this round on purpose. He needed to test Tenji's resolve and faith. Now he trusted Tenji fully and was glad Tenji hadn't pressed the button, even when it meant risking everything. Tenji saw how brutal the game truly was and asked if Yuichi honestly believed they could win. Yuichi said the proof was right there. Getting food to Tenji meant the plan was already halfway finished. On the other side, Maria had been hauled to safety by 2 members of the rival team. She put it together quickly. Yuichi had used her as bait to pull the guards away. She never expected him to push her into real danger just to glue those 2 to her side. If Onigawara hadn't grabbed her, she would have gone over for real. Chisato wanted to sprint after Yuichi immediately, but Onigawara knew he couldn't carry Maria alone and refused to leave her. The move wasn't flawless, but it bought Yuichi the one thing he needed most time. Tenji called it reckless. Yuichi answered that he'd already mapped how they'd react. If one stayed, the other would too. He hadn't spent 3 days just wearing Tenji down. He'd been studying the rival team's personalities. The softest heart on that squad was Onigawara. He's loud and quick to anger, but underneath that he's the most gentle, carrying guilt from past mistakes and protective of women. Yuichi was sure Onigawara would stop to rescue Maria. He also figured Chisato would mirror him, because Chisato always moved in tandem with Onigawara, responding to his choices instead of leading with his own. Chisato was good at many things but didn't shine at any one of them, which gave him a polished, performative feel that naturally fell in behind someone direct like Onigawara. With the food run solved, Yuichi could finally push his real win condition: rake the other team from the inside. He had already planted the first crack, and that crack was Maria. Back at camp, tensions popped. Onigawara snapped at Chisato. Then he made a hard pivot. He said he would switch to Yuichi's team to keep Maria safe. Earlier, after pulling her from the cliff, Maria had thanked Chisato instead of Onigawara because she was still mad at Onigawara for accidentally peeking on her while she was bathing. Onigawara apologized in a panic. Maria smiled, accepted it, and told him she owed him her life. The other 2 seekers didn't get why Yuichi did any of this. Maria spoke up in Yuichi's defense, which made Onigawara squint at her motives. He noticed she was limping, crouched down, and carried her on his back. On the walk to the supply camp, she praised his kindness and sighed that fate had stuck her on Yuichi's side. When the food runners returned and heard the story, they chose not to blame Onigawara. Instead, they settled on a longer game plan, slow pressure and steady counters, aimed squarely at Yuichi. Later, Yuichi went back to the supply camp and called Maria over like Giga Chat. He said if the other team wanted a slow, long game, he would match them. Onigawara told Yuichi to let Maria go after what he'd just done. Yuichi acted like a boss who could treat his own teammates however he wanted. Onigawara got angry and tried to fight, but Maria stopped him. She said this was exactly the reaction Yuichi wanted. Yuichi grabbed Maria by the hair and acted rough. The other team yelled to Manabu, but Manabu said the rules only ban violence against opponents, not against your own teammates. Onigawara then said he would switch to Yuichi's side to protect Maria. Chisato thought it was a trap. Yuichi admitted Chisato had some experience with girls, but Onigawara still believed Maria was being hurt for real. Chisato teased Onigawara for being bad with girls. They almost fought until the youngest teammate split them up. The youngest said they should ask their captain. Yuichi mocked Onigawara for always needing orders and not acting on his own, even to protect a girl. Onigawara left with the youngest to talk to the captain. This was part of Yuichi's plan. He knew the captain held the team together. If the captain was away, Chisato and Onigawara would clash more. Yuichi had already thought through the outcomes. Maybe Onigawara would punch him and break the rules, or, if not, Yuichi would slowly pull Onigawara to his team anyway. A few hours later, Onigawara and the youngest came back. Onigawara said he was switching to Yuichi's team. Yuichi accepted right away. Their captain had refused to take Maria, so Onigawara chose to carry extra debt just to guard her, but he did not plan to help Yuichi. He also thought he could finally punch Yuichi. Yuichi didn't allow it. He moved fast, pinned Onigawara, and tied him up so no rules would be broken. That night, Yuichi told Tenji he had lured one enemy over. Next, he needed Onigawara to give up the captain's hiding place. Onigawara felt ashamed for trying to help Maria and ending up tied. Maria worried Yuichi would torture him for info. Onigawara said he could endure it and it wouldn't matter he didn't know the captain's spot. That surprised Yuichi. He asked how, then, Onigawara had gone to see the captain. Earlier, the youngest had only said he would call the captain, then came back with Onigawara. Yuichi understood. The youngest was the real captain and the brain of their team. Yuichi was glad he figured it out, but the youngest said it was already too late. By accepting Onigawara, Yuichi had brought a time bomb onto his side. The youngest said he would end the match soon, and that Yuichi would learn why Onigawara was a bomb. He then said goodbye to the captain and went to hunt Tenji. The overseers explained more. The youngest was a genius since childhood. His weakness was boredom. He joined this game for fun. He controlled the visible captain because he knew a dark secret about him. Now Yuichi saw the trap. If Onigawara attacked his old teammates while on Yuichi's side, Yuichi's team would lose for breaking the rules. If Yuichi kept him tied, he had to watch him non-stop and couldn't track the enemy. To make things worse, Banri, the serious one, and Chisato came to sit near Yuichi and keep an eye on him too. Everyone waited until morning. In the morning, Maria walked off and met the youngest. He quickly guessed she was part of the staff. He tried to flip her. He said Yuichi and Tenji looked dirty and worn out after 3 days in a cave, but Maria looked too clean. Maria refused to betray Yuichi because she needed to protect her cute and innocent image. The youngest tried another angle. He asked if she wanted to see Yuichi, the cocky planner, lose badly. She said she did. She called Yuichi and pretended to ask where Tenji was while no one was watching her. Yuichi told her. She gave that info to the youngest. When Yuichi realized this, he was furious. The enemy moved toward Tenji. The youngest called Tenji and told him to cut ties with Yuichi. Tenji still trusted Yuichi. Soon after, the youngest found Tenji's spot. Then Manabu's voice called everyone back to the supply camp. The round was over. Manabu said Yuichi's team had won. The youngest was shocked. He had found Tenji first, but that wasn't the only win condition. Their captain had pressed the surrender button. Right before the round was called, Yuichi put on a full show of rage to drag the whole enemy squad away from camp. That left him alone with Onigawara. He told Onigawara straight that this wasn't how he wanted to win, but he would do it if he had no other choice. Then he dialed the team's captain and gave an order. Press the surrender button now. If the captain refused, Yuichi said he'd keep beating Onigawara until the captain caved. He started throwing punches, one after another. On the other end, the captain wondered why Onigawara wasn't making a sound. Yuichi put the phone at Onigawara's ear. Onigawara, tough as iron, told his captain not to quit. Since plane hits weren't working, Yuichi pushed the threat higher. He knew the two of them had once played basketball together, and that a bad pass from Onigawara had injured the captain. So he promised something worse. He would snap Onigawara's fingers, one by one, until he heard the forfeit. He counted down from 10. A sharp crack followed. The captain, who knew that awful sound from his own injury, understood immediately. He broke down crying and begged Yuichi to stop. Yuichi said he'd keep going finger after finger until the surrender was real. Yuichi also said out loud what he'd figured out. The captain was the reason the team had debt, and the reason they were dragged into this game. The captain apologized to his squad. He explained that his family's business collapsed. They fell into debt, and he had to quit school. He still wanted to play in the final tournament with his friends, so the youngest talked him into entering this game and acting as their leader. Even after losing, the captain wanted to swing at Yuichi for hurting Onigawara. Onigawara stopped him and revealed the trick no fingers were broken. Yuichi had snapped his own fingers to fake the sound and mess with the captain's head. The youngest couldn't accept losing and started blaming both the captain and Onigawara. Banri grabbed the youngest, gave him a sharp smack on the butt, and shut him down. As the group's big brother type, he was the only one who could rein the youngest in. Banri added that if the captain was willing to risk Onigawara's safety just to win, the team would stop respecting him. They moved forward from there. The captain promised he would take the debt if they lost. Even if he could never play basketball with them again, he felt at peace, because this round had already felt like the final game he wanted so badly. Later, Yuichi explained another piece. He had known Maria worked for the organizers the whole time. That's why he didn't hesitate when he pushed her off the cliff earlier. He wasn't worried about her life. His big hurt and betrayed act after she sold him out was bait to make the other side relax. Tenji helped Yuichi back to his feet. He admitted Yuichi's methods were dirty, but pointed out the enemy team's friendship was still intact. He also noted that if the captain had waited even a little longer, Yuichi might have actually started snapping Onigawara's fingers for real. Manabu ended the round and told Yuichi and Tenji to leave while the fourth game was prepared. They were warned not to talk about the games at all, or the punishment would be severe. Once outside, Yuichi and Tenji went to find Shio. At school, they ran into Yutori. She was relieved to see them alive, but she also said Shio had run away. Yuichi guessed Shio bolted, because she knew they had caught her lying about her debt. Yutori filled in the timeline. The day after they came back from Game 2, Shiho, Yutori, and Shubi went to class like normal. Their classmates cornered Shuo and accused her of stealing the trip money. Every other class kept their funds in a bank. Shiho had insisted on holding cash herself. Shibi wanted to tell the truth that Tenji was the one who took the money, but that would break the rule about revealing game information. So he stayed quiet. Since people assumed Shibi was working with Shiho, he said he'd pay the class back himself. 2 days later, Shibei's father was arrested. Someone had leaked the scandals that got exposed during Game 2. Yuichi guessed Shibei told his dad about the game to ask for 2 million yen, and that confession is what triggered the arrest. The next day, Shibei apologized for not being able to repay the class. The bullying got worse. Shiho tried to shield him, but in the end, both of them dropped out. Then a classmate ran to Yuichi and Tenji with terrible news. At Shibei's house, his father had been murdered. Shibei was found covered in blood and taken by the police. When he saw Yuichi and Tenji, he begged them to believe him he hadn't done anything. Tenji wanted to speak up for him, but Yuichi held him back so he wouldn't spill game secrets by accident. Later, Tenji saw Shiho's father escorting Shibei and took it as proof the man was tied to the game somehow. Yuichi stopped Tenji again, and Shiho's father told them both not to interfere. Yuichi didn't budge. He said he had no one precious to lose, so they could aim every threat at him. Yutori tried to talk to them, but Yuichi snapped. He said that after learning who he really was, she treated him like a monster, and now she was pretending to care. He blamed her for dragging the group down from the start and for never making her own choices. That night, heading home, he replayed his own words. He had been cruel on purpose to push Yutori out of danger. He didn't want her getting hurt. His phone rang from an unknown number. The voice on the line said they had kidnapped Yutori. They ordered Yuichi to join their game. If he showed up, they would torture him hard. If he refused, they would hurt Yutori instead less than him, but still hurt her. They warned him not to bring anyone, or she would pay the price. Yuichi's voice went cold. He told them not to touch her. If they did, he would end every last one of them. Later, Yuichi went to the meeting spot alone. A bunch of thugs were there, holding Yutori like a hostage. One guy wore a Manabu mask and called himself Kuroki. Yuichi told them to let Yutori go first. Kuroki showed he was in charge and said he could expose Yuichi's secret, the kind that would make Yuichi think twice about saving her. Yuichi hated it, but he agreed to play by Kuroki's rules. Kuroki explained the game. There would be 3 rounds of pain. Each round, Yutori was allowed to take the hit for Yuichi. If she took it, her version would be lighter than his. But if Yuichi argued or spoke out of turn, then both of them would get punished. That meant Yutori had to make the choices. If she refused to decide, Yuichi would automatically get the punishment. Round 1 was a straight punch. A huge thug would hit the target. If Yutori chose to take it, she'd get 1 punch, and Yuichi would get 3. If she froze, Yuichi would get hit anyway. Yutori hesitated. Yuichi gave her a small signal that meant, "I'll handle it." Kuroki told him not to move and said he was being nice by letting Yuichi take all 3 punches alone. The big guy swung 3 times. Yuichi didn't flinch. He thought these hits were nothing compared to the blows he took from the other team's leader earlier. For round 2, Yutori said she would step in. Kuroki grabbed her wrist, pushed her onto a table, and said her punishment was ripping off 1 fingernail. She started bleeding right away and shaking from the pain. Yuichi jumped in and offered himself instead. Kuroki smirked and made it worse. 3 nails for Yuichi. Yuichi told him to hurry up. Kuroki yanked out 3 nails without pausing. Now bleeding and angry, Yuichi wondered why anyone would follow a creep like this. Kuroki bragged that he was the smartest, the bravest, and the one person who would never betray his friends. The last round had 2 choices. Either Yutori had to jump with no clothes on, or Yuichi would get stabbed 3 times in the hand. They had 1 minute to decide. Yutori was scared but said she would follow whatever Yuichi picked. Yuichi chose the knife. Yutori felt worse, but Kuroki didn't care. He stabbed Yuichi's hand 3 times. After that, Kuroki said they could leave. Yuichi said he wasn't finished. He told Yutori not to blame herself. She was only targeted because they wanted to hurt him. She stayed with him, even knowing what kind of person he was, and wrapped his hand with bandages. Yuichi warned her that if she stayed, she might see something she would never forget. She stayed anyway. Then Yuichi challenged Kuroki to 1 more game. He put 10 million yen on the line if Kuroki played. He also said, if Kuroki knew who Yuichi was, he'd know Yuichi had way more than 10 million behind him. Kuroki got interested. The game was simple. Rock, paper, scissors. If Kuroki won, he got the 10 million. If Kuroki lost, he had to sacrifice fingers based on what he threw. Scissors would cost 2 fingers, paper would cost the whole hand, and rock would cost nothing. Because Yuichi's hand was injured, it looked like he could only throw rock or paper, which gave Kuroki a big advantage. Yuichi also promised extra cash to Kuroki's men if their boss agreed. The gang cheered for Kuroki to do it. Kuroki tried to be safe. If he picked paper, he would either win or tie, since injured Yuichi shouldn't be able to play scissors. He asked what happens on a tie. Yuichi calmly said, "Nothing happens." Kuroki thought about scissors, but that was a 50-50 gamble, and he didn't want to risk losing 2 fingers. Yuichi could tell Kuroki planned to go with paper. He said, "I'm not picking paper," and told Kuroki to start. First throw, both went rock. Second throw, Yuichi switched and threw scissors with his other, uninjured hand. Kuroki didn't expect it and lost. He started yelling that it wasn't fair. Yuichi kept cool and explained he only promised not to choose paper. He never said he would play with one specific hand. Kuroki tried to cancel the bet and told his men to attack. Right then, Tenji showed up with the real game organizers. They arrested Kuroki and his crew for pretending to be staff. The supervisor in charge of Yuichi's side said they were taking Kuroki away for punishment. Yuichi asked for one thing first: 5 of Kuroki's fingers. Kuroki refused. The supervisor forced Kuroki's hand to the table so Yuichi could do it. Kuroki screamed. Yuichi paused and gave him a choice. He could pick one of his underlings to take the pain instead. That underling would lose only 1 finger. Kuroki begged his men to step up. Not one of them moved. Yuichi's vision went dark and he collapsed from blood loss. The supervisor ordered Kuroki taken away and said Yuichi had outsmarted him from the very start. She explained it clearly. Yuichi used his injured hand to throw scissors on purpose, so Kuroki would focus on avoiding a tie and forget about the other hand. Yuichi didn't just win the game. He also broke the bond between Kuroki and his own gang in 1 move. They rushed Yuichi for treatment. While that was happening, Maria told Tenji what the next choice would be: either save Shibi or take on an extra 500 million yen of debt. That new debt came after Shibi's father died and left the family broke. When Yuichi woke up, he said his goal was to save Shibi and expose the whole game. Money meant nothing to him. He was moved to emergency care. Tenji and Yutori decided they would give everything they had to rescue Shibe. And that's where this video ends. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Also watch this following video until the new one.